Here's what's coming up on The World Today. Russia expels the deputy chief of the U.S. mission in Moscow. Western leaders condemn shelling reported in Ukraine's Donbas region. Plus, France and its European allies announce a withdrawal from Mali. A warm welcome to the program today. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. Now, a lot is happening in the Baltic today, with Russia and Ukraine topping the headlines. First, Russia today expelled the United States Deputy Chief of Mission to Moscow. It comes as the United States issued increasingly detailed warnings of a possibly imminent Russian invasion of neighboring Ukraine. Bart Gorman was the second most senior official at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, after the ambassador and a key member of the embassy's senior management team. He'd already left with his family last Thursday, same day as Russia's diplomats' day holiday. In the meantime, U.S. Defense Secretary Austin Lloyd says the United States has seen Russia stocking up on blood supplies, inching troops closer to Ukraine's borders and flying in more combat aircraft, dismissing Moscow's claims of withdrawal. Moscow denies it's planning to invade its neighbor, saying this week it is pulling back some troops. The Defense Ministry even released footage claiming to show more departing units. Mr. Lloyd also spoke about the report of shelling in Donbas.
We see some of those troops inch closer to that border. We see them fly in more combat and support aircraft. We see them sharpen their readiness in the Black Sea. We even see them stocking up their blood supplies. You know, I was a soldier myself not that long ago, and I know firsthand that you don't do these sort of things for no reason. There is nothing inevitable about this looming conflict. It can still be averted. The path of diplomacy may be difficult, but it is still worth the trek. And NATO, as I said, remains sure-footed.
Well, U.S. President Joe Biden has also spoken today about a possible Russian invasion into Ukraine. He was addressing reporters as he departed the White House, saying the threat of a Russian invasion of Ukraine is very high, but that the door to diplomatic solution remains open. He says Russia has not moved back its forces from the Ukrainian border, and the United States has reason to believe Russia is engaged in a false flag operation that Moscow would use to justify an invasion. Let's talk to our Washington correspondent now, Maria Bird. Maria, I know U.S. intelligence and that of other Western countries may be picking up on Russia's military movement around Ukraine, but right now, as Russia says, this is all propaganda. Why is the U.S. and these countries keeping the proof to themselves?
Is that they're still seeing troops right at the border. And so, and as you know, the U.S. has now said that they want all Americans out of Ukraine. And so, and obviously, the more intelligence they give to the media and they give outside of the internal U.S. Defense Department and also in terms of their allies in NATO, the more likely that it is that it could potentially create more challenges. You can hear the Secretary of Defense state that there's still room for diplomacy. I think that the president and his administration are hopeful that a war does not break out and that invasion does not happen. And so the more information they're able to keep internal, the hopes is that they will be able to potentially even still see diplomacy rather than invasion.
Yeah, and the Defense Secretary, Austin Lloyd, they're confirming Russia is still massing more troops near the border. But let's talk about Gorman's expulsion, the U.S. Deputy Chief of Mission in Moscow. In light of what's currently going on in the region and now the reports of shelling, President Biden has not said America's next move, even though he's already promised the U.S. will respond if Russia attacks Ukraine.
Yes, you know, I think the shelling is of great concern. And as you mentioned, the expulsion of Gorman is also one of those hints potentially that there could be an invasion. And so President Biden at this time is really looking to be able to ensure, one, that this does not break 30 years of peace. And, Ukraine has said several times that they are going to keep their independence. And we know that Ukrainian soldiers are there at the border as well. And so the issue is really about not going back 30 years in time, and that the U.S. is supporting Ukraine and supporting the efforts for not having an invasion by Russia at this time. And we know that foreign relations and foreign affairs is one of the highlights of our president's administration and of his skill sets. And so he can remember what it looked like 30 years ago as he was a congressional member during those times as well.
Maria, thanks again for bringing us up to speed. We know a lot will be developing as the day progresses. And now to the report of the alleged shelling. This eyewitness video we're about to see, it was filmed in Marinka, Donetsk. It captures local streets and buildings as the sound is heard. We'll hear it in a minute. Artillery shelling was also heard earlier today near the airport and Elenovka, a village in Donetsk province, both parts of eastern Ukraine controlled by Russian-backed rebels and Ukrainian forces traded accusations that each had fired across the ceasefire line in eastern Ukraine. Details of the incidents could not be independently confirmed, and initial reports suggested they were on a similar scale to ceasefire violations that have been common throughout the 8-year conflict. I do apologize we couldn't bring you that video, but we will as soon as we can. But as expected, NATO is concerned Russia could be trying to create a pretext for an invasion of Ukraine. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says an invasion could be the result of a false flag operation conducted by Russian intelligence officers to provide an excuse for invading Ukraine.
Russia is trying to stage a pretext for an armed attack against Ukraine. It is still no clarity, no certainty about the Russian intentions. We don't know what will happen, but what we do know is that Russia has amassed the biggest force we have seen in Europe for decades in and around Ukraine. And we have seen attempts to stage a pretext, false flag operations to provide an excuse for invading Ukraine.
Well, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky tweeted his thoughts today about the ongoing crisis, saying pro-Russian forces in eastern Donbass region had shelled a kindergarten, calling it a big provocation. He said, "It is important that diplomats and OSCE remain in their monitoring activities. An additional deterrent, we need an effective mechanism for recording all ceasefire violations." Ukraine has accused rebels of firing shells at several locations, including some that struck a kindergarten and others that hit a school where pupils had to flee to the cellar. Now, much of the conversation in Brussels today surrounds the current situation between Ukraine and Russia. Earlier, the EU foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, said the continental body is standing by with sanctions ready for Russia as soon as needed.
We have a very tough package prepared, and as High Representative, I am ready to present this package to the Council, because it is the Council who has the responsibility and the capability of approving sanctions, and it's up to me to present the package of sanctions, and I will do it as soon as needed.
We have to consider the consequences of those sanctions. Of course, the sanctions must be effective. This is a very important element of the sanctions. But of course, we have to calculate all the possible consequences on us too. But this is important, and it should be in our pocket in order to just prevent Russia from unnecessary increase of tensions in this region.
And Russia, on the other hand, says it will continue to pull back troops and military hardware it says have been involved in planned military exercises. During a media briefing in Moscow today, Defense Ministry spokesperson Igor Konashenkov confirmed the withdrawal of some forces from training grounds in Crimea. He also stated that Russian military units currently in Belarus on joint drills will rebase after completing live-fire exercises scheduled for Saturday. The US and Western allies do not believe Russia is pulling back troops, but say that at least 7,000 more were added on Wednesday. So, leader of Russia's main ally in the Baltic is Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. He says Russian troops may stay in Belarus as long as needed. A foreign minister for Russia, Sergei Lavrov, addressing Western concerns that Russian troops may stay in Belarus for a long time, said both countries would end their joint military drills on February 20, as previously planned. Those exercises started since February 10. Now, separately, news media have quoted Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov as saying that the matter of extending Russian troops' stay in Belarus is not on the agenda. President Lukashenko was quoted as saying that Belarus may keep some of the military hardware brought in by Russia for ongoing joint drills. Also speaking about this is Estonia's Prime Minister, who says President Vladimir Putin is enjoying the international attention generated by Russia's massive military drills on Ukraine's borders and is looking for a successful war to lift support at home.
Signal that this kind of threatening ultimatums at gunpoint really works. So there's no signal that that this is not awarded, which means that the next time they will go even further.
But do you think, are you saying that there would be a political decision, say a summit?
Actually, it's, practicing attacking.
Kaja Kallas, the Estonian Prime Minister, beg your pardon. We'll have more on the situation in Ukraine after the break. Plus, well, how a strawberry entered the Guinness Book of World Records. Please stay with us. Welcome back to The World Today. So the stories making headlines today: Russia expelling the U.S. Deputy Chief of a Mission in Moscow, and a report of a shelling of a primary school, a kindergarten, beg your pardon, in Donbas region of Ukraine. Plus, Western allies saying Russia is not pulling back those military forces from the border with Ukraine, even though we heard the Russian defense spokesperson saying that Russia plans to pull back even more military troops from the border. Joining us now is Foreign Affairs commentator Colin Swicke. He joins us from Brussels, where much of the discussion is going on right now. Collins, thank you for joining me on the program. Do you think that the reported shelling of the kindergarten in Donbas was done by Russia?
Well, Russia is not leaving the world with any alternative than to conclude in the affirmative, in the absence of them either confirming or denying the bombing. That's number one. Then number two, lessons drawn from history has shown us that the Donbas region has been used by Russia as an entry point in their incursion into Ukraine. Let us recall the March 2014, February-March, as a matter of fact, 2014 annexation of Crimea. The Donbas region was the entry point. And again, the buildup of Russian troops, about 130,000, not 130,000 troops are actually positioned mainly in that region. Now, it has been said that the shelling itself actually happened through the separatist group, the Ukrainian separatist group that want to actually secede from Ukraine. However, we also know that they are very strongly backed by Russia And so it could very well be, there are strong indications indeed that, there are Russian footprints in that shelling of the kindergarten.
Well, for days now, these Western allies have been saying that Russia is planning an invasion, and some analysts have established that Russia is just waiting for some sort of provocation, from either Ukraine or the US or the UK. But, a lot of rhetoric has been going on, the US and the UK insisting, that Russia is still planning to invade as early as even yesterday. Now, do you think that the military drills themselves are a cover-up, for Russia's real intentions in the region?
Well, what Russia is saying actually stands in sharp contrast to actions on the ground and evidence, as well as military intelligence. Now, we can't speak very much about military intelligence because, somehow we are not empowered. We are not privy to what is going on around that sphere. But what we can see here is a pattern out of a typical warfare game whereby misinformation, disinformation is employed, whereby denial is also the order of the day. So it does look like Russia is actually using all of these out of the war playbook. Of course, the United States and their transatlantic allies have always, sounded a note of warning, actually drawing from their intelligence. And each time, Russia has denied it, but then the action on the ground actually confirms, what is happening. So it leaves the whole thing in tatters because obviously, while all of these, confusions are going on, there are also negotiations. I mean, in terms of, continued negotiations with Russia, United States, even France joining. Russia had made some attempts as well. So, it's all looking like there is that the war is imminent.
Yeah, and still the US says there is room for diplomacy. NATO also says there's room for diplomacy. What would that look like in light of what has already happened today?
Well, under the circumstances, I think we should all permit ourselves a little bit of illusion. I mean, in terms of, trying to dream of, an ideal situation. Now, the ideal situation that I see here, give and take, is a situation where Russia, one way or the other, is pacified. Now, it is clear that Russia's main demand, which is that Ukraine is actually excluded entirely by NATO in terms of its expansion eastward, that Ukraine is never going to join NATO. Well, that much is obvious. However, America, at least not in the immediate, they are not joining in the immediate, but the United States and NATO are unprepared to give those assurances to Russia. I believe that in the situation that we are in now, Russia has got to receive such assurances because anyway, it isn't part of the plan that it happens in the foreseeable future. So why not reassure him and then move the needle a little bit further? That's on the part of the demand from Russia. But on the other side, Putin himself has got to realize that Ukraine is a sovereign nation, and if it wishes through its leaders to join the European Union, they have the right to do that. As a matter of fact, they have long ceased to belong to the Soviet Union. That does not exist anymore, and so he should also stop his resistance of Ukraine joining the European Union. I believe that if they start with these two concessions, that war may ultimately be averted.
I don't think anyone wants a war, but then you have to prepare for it all the same. Collins, thank you again for joining me on The World Today.
Always my pleasure. Thank you, Amarachi, for having me.
Coming to Africa now, France and its allies in a European force announced they will begin withdrawing troops from Mali after almost a decade fighting an armed unrest. The troops have been involved in the fighting against Islamist militants in the country since 2013. Well, this morning, President Macron said the decision to leave followed a breakdown in diplomatic relations amid growing hostility from Mali's governing military leaders.
Relations between France and Mali have deteriorated since the ruling military junta went back on an agreement to organize an election in February and propose holding power until 2025. It has also deployed Russian private military contractors, which some European countries have said is incompatible with their mission. Leaving Mali, the epicenter for years of the militant threat, has raised concerns of an emboldened insurgency across the Sahel region. But French President Emmanuel Macron says neighboring Niger has agreed to host European forces fighting Islamists.
We cannot remain involved military-wise alongside a de facto authority whose strategy or hidden objectives we don't share. This is the situation that we're facing in Mali today. The fight against terrorism cannot justify everything. It should not, under a pretext of absolute priority, be transformed into a practice of indefinitely maintaining power. It also could not justify an escalation of violence through the use of mercenaries, whose abuses are documented in the Central African Republic and whose use of force is not regulated by any rule or convention. In these conditions, France and its partners involved in the fight against terrorism, meaning the countries participating in the Takuba task force, have decided to withdraw their military presence in Mali.
The French president has also refuted claims that the withdrawal is an acceptance of failure and insists that France remains committed to dealing with Islamic insurgencies in the region. Successive coups in Mali, Chad and Burkina Faso, all ex-French colonies, have weakened France's West African alliances, aided jihadists who control large swaths of the territory, and opened the door for Russia to fill the vacuum. France has had troops in Mali since 2013, when it intervened to drive back Islamist militants advancing on the capital. The militants have since regrouped and are waging an increasingly bloody insurgency across the region. The planned withdrawal, which is expected to happen over a 4 to 6 month period, was agreed at a meeting of European and African leaders in Paris on Wednesday night.
By the people through
Speaking after the meeting, Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo says it's important a UN peacekeeping force continue to operate in Mali.
All of the states in West Africa are vulnerable to the penetration of terrorist outrages in West Africa. And we are therefore re-examining, together with our friends and partners, the manner in which we can respond most effectively to these emerging threats. That there is a need for a broad coalition of forces against terrorism in West Africa is indisputable.
The meeting hosted by President Macron brought together the leaders of France's key allies in the Sahel region, that's Chad, Mauritania, and Niger. Officials from Mali and Burkina Faso, which also recently experienced a coup, were not invited. Other African leaders were present, along with the European Council President and European Commission Chief, as well as the Italian Prime Minister.
Now, ever wondered how many fruits have made it to the Guinness Book of World Records? Well, I don't know, but here's what I know. An Israeli farmer has grown the what is considered to be the world's heaviest strawberry, according to the Guinness World Records. At 289 grams, a strawberry is about 5 times the average weight of a berry of this variety. And that's according to Nir Dai, a researcher and strawberry breeder at Israel's Volcanic Institute, where the strain was developed. According to the Record Books website, the strawberry is 18 centimeters long, is 4 centimeters thick, and 34 centimeters in circumference. Now, apparently, cold weather conditions in early 2021 slowed the process for the record-breaking strawberries ripening, allowing it to continue gaining weight. The giant strawberry was found a year ago and kept in a freezer until now, when the record was confirmed. The previous record was held by a Japanese farmer who discovered a strawberry weighing 250 grams in his harvest in 2015. I'm sure it tastes just as sweet as a regular strawberry. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.